Newcastle United make history. Their first trophy in 58 years. Their first trip to Wembley in nearly 70 years. And they absolutely deserved it. To a man, they were unbelievable today. Tonali, Bruno Guimaraes, Joelinton, Alexander Isak, Big Dan Burn with a man of the match performance. Do you know what? The Geordies will take over London, and I'm actually fairly happy for them. I always preferred the underdog story. And Newcastle fans have been through so much pain in recent years, only just losing to Manchester United only a couple of years ago in this competition. But they've learned, they've got more experience, they've matured. And from minute 1 to 90, their fans were singing, waving their scarves. I think Newcastle now, this is something to build on for them. If they can pin down Alexander Isak, if they can pin down Bruno Guimaraes to long-term contracts, get in the Champions League, I don't see why anyone would want to leave. You've just had your first bit of silverware in such a long time. Make sure you go down, drop a like on the video if you haven't already. We're about 100 subscribers away from 48k, and the road to 50k is well and truly on. I said, everyone, 3 days ago, I said Newcastle, if they get down that left-hand side, if they get down where Conser was, without Trent, without Connor Bradley, they will cause huge problems. And they were the better team by far. By far. Liverpool were toothless. Mohamed Salah didn't really do anything. And they got a consolation goal in the 90th minute from Federico Chiesa. But Newcastle outworked them, outfought them, more energy, better decision-making in the final third, defending set pieces. Nick Pope only really had to make a couple of saves. They peppered Kelleher. Alexander Isak probably could have even had a hat-trick today with maybe better decision-making. And this was Newcastle, by the way, without Lewis Hall, right? Without Anthony Gordon, without Botman, and they were just unbelievable. They deserve it. Newcastle have had to wait such a long time. I'm not going to lie, that is one of my favourite midfields in world football. I think it complements each other fantastically. Joelinton celebrating every single challenge. Tonali's engine, to the ability to get up and down every single game for 90 minutes. And Bruno Guimaraes, if anyone thought that guy was not world class, just look at performances today. Scores the winner at the London Stadium, kissing the Newcastle badge. 6 days later, delivers silverware for Newcastle. Livramento will leave today with his wallet, with his car keys, and Mohamed Salah in his pocket. Trippier got that experience in the team as well. Nick Pope obviously got booked. But the front three, I was really, really impressed with Harvey Barnes. I was really, really impressed with Alexander Isak. I thought his finish was absolutely insane. World class. And it was a Liverpool team that they made some massive mistakes. How you can put McAllister on Dan Burn. One's 5'10", the other one's 6'7". If that's not a mismatch, then I don't know what is. And he was causing them problems in the first half, but they kept being consistent, and they kept trying to leave him with Dan Burn. And that's what made them pay. The header is Alan Shearer-esque. It's a bullet header into the bottom corner. And I don't even think Kelleher really had that bad of a game. I don't think he could have done much against the Alexander Isak finish. And I don't really think he could save that header. He did make some decent one-on-one saves against Isak. Against Harvey Barnes, he made a good save. Against Joe Willock when he come on. But boy, Newcastle United. If you own a bar in Newcastle and you were going to close tonight, keep that open because they will be partying into the early hours of the morning. Wouldn't surprise me if a load of the Geordies were to call in sick tomorrow. It's something they have not experienced in such a long time. 58 years or whatever it is, or 70 years without a trip to Wembley. And you turn up and you play against the best team in the world. Well, the best team in the country, not the world anymore because they're not in the Champions League, who have dominated the Premier League, who only beat Newcastle 2-0 a few weeks ago. And they've turned up in their numbers. Guarantee you there wasn't a single seat available in the Newcastle end. The white and black army taking over. Dan Burns' goal, Alexander Isak's goal. And I always say the first 15 minutes of the second half on this channel was so important. And Liverpool switched off. We'll start with the first half in general. I thought Newcastle for the first 30 minutes, if you think back to that Man United game, they conceded on the 34th minute. They had a really, really good half hour and then they dropped their heads and conceded 2 goals. Not this time. They were relentless in their pressing. To a man-on-man marking. Their midfield is just, for me, like I said, one of the best out there. It gives the balance they've got compared to that Liverpool midfield of Szoboszlai and McAllister and Gravenberch. They did not turn up. They couldn't deal with it. And it reminded me of the PSG game. PSG pressed them relentlessly in Paris, and Liverpool could not cope. Maybe people might say, that they're tired from the 120 minutes Tuesday. Doesn't matter. When you're an elite football team, you have to go and you have to give everything every single minute. I'm not saying they didn't give everything, but they just weren't good enough today. The first goal, Kieran Trippier puts in a decent ball towards the back end of the penalty area, and Dan Burn rises there with a bullet header and puts it into the bottom corner. Kelleher, I don't really think could have done much about it. And they were asking questions 5 or 10 minutes before that with Dan Burn. He kept being free, one of the best headers of a ball in the Premier League. You can't really beat him in the air. Jamie Carragher said at halftime, maybe bring Jota on, who's a lot more aerially dominant. I understand Konate and Virgil van Dijk are marking in around that 6-yard box where most goals from corners are scored. But you can't leave a player like Dan Burn, who's pretty much made a lot of his career goals out of this, in a final free with McAllister marking him. That is absolutely criminal. Arne Slot has to take that on the chin. And then we get into the second half. Liverpool start better. The tempo goes up. You could see that there was a couple of, they must have been absolutely grilled in the halftime changing room by Arne Slot. He doesn't make any changes at halftime. They go out again. And then Alexander Isak. I've been so critical on Jacob Murphy, and I do apologise because I've said so many times this season, this guy isn't good enough. But on a day like today, when you need your big players to rise to the big occasion, that is exactly what Murphy and Alexander Isak did. The finish is absolutely insane. Passing from Murphy, it's kind of on the half volley, wraps his foot around it, straight into the corner. And Newcastle were in dreamland. They're 2-0 up against the champions-elect Liverpool. Arne Slot meant they make some changes. He brought on Darwin Núñez for Jota. He brought on Curtis Jones for Konate. Throwing the kitchen sink at it. He brought on Cody Gakpo for McAllister. Federico Chiesa for Gravenberch. Harvey Elliott for Diaz. If I'm being critical on Arne Slot, I think Harvey Elliott should have started this game. Liverpool fans are begging him to start. Turned up with a big goal in Paris against PSG. Just got the ability to take a player on, can play a decent ball in the final third, which he did actually for the goal for Federico Chiesa. And he's just got something in his locker. He's just different to Diaz. Diaz has got a lot of pace, can get him behind and really good on the press, similar to Darwin Núñez. But I think when it comes down to picking the moments in the final third, the decision making, I think Harvey Elliott is just a little bit better. If he comes at halftime, maybe a different game, but take nothing away from Newcastle because they were by far the better team. He threw the kitchen sink at it. They did get a consolation goal in the 94th minute. Harvey Elliott with a inch-perfect through ball into Chiesa. It's a really, really good finish on his weaker side. Good first touch on the right. Finishes it with his left foot into the bottom corner. But then after that, Joelinton, 95th minute, running the ball into the corner flag. Same as they then Newcastle brought on Callum Wilson, who was doing the same. Joe Willock. And you could see how much Newcastle wanted it. They wanted it more. They deserved it more. They were the better team from minute one all the way into 100 minutes. Defending set pieces. Nick Pope with a big save from Curtis Jones. And I think when Newcastle fans, they'll be out until the early hours of the morning. When they wake up tomorrow and they're thinking, I don't know if this gets them into Europe. This might get them into the Conference League winning this. But they still could get in top 4. I did predict them to finish third, but this will be something to build on throughout the remainder of the season. They've got some tough games coming up. Don't get me wrong. They are the team right now that are going to have confidence oozing through their veins. They've, in terms of their league position, they are currently, as you can see, the little trophy emoji from Google. They're 6th in the league. They're only 2. They've got a game in hand as well on Chelsea. If they win their game in hand, they will go 4th in the Premier League. And they'd only be 4 points off Nottingham Forest. I did actually predict Newcastle to finish third. And you look at the games they've got coming up. They've got Brentford at St James's Park. They've got Leicester away. They've got Man United at St James's Park and Crystal Palace and Ipswich at St. They've got a lot of home games coming up. Brighton away will be tough. Villa away will be tough, and Chelsea away will be tough. But if they can do Brentford, if they can do Man United, Palace, and Leicester, and really get the a winning run of games going to the end of the season. They've got every single chance of making top four. And if you would have said to Eddie Howe at the beginning of the season, you would have won the League Cup and got Champions League football, he would bite your arm off. And so would every single Newcastle fan out there. You got to think 70 odd years without a trip to Wembley. You've also got to think 55 years without a trophy. And they turn up and put that level of performance in. That's one of the best performances in a final I've seen in a long, long time. That was better than the Liverpool performance. I know Liverpool did it with kids last year, but it took a Virgil van Dijk header in extra time to beat Chelsea. Newcastle beat them both on and off the pitch. You could see the Liverpool heads dropping when Newcastle started really well in the first 15, 20 minutes. I'm happy for them. Like I said at the beginning, I always love an underdog story. It's going to be interesting to see how they get on in their next 5 or 6 games, a lot of them at home. You know, if they can build some momentum, get into the Champions League, pin down Alexander Isak, pin down Bruno Guimaraes. Gordon's just signed a long-term deal as well. I don't see why these players would want to leave. They've just got their hands on some silverware. If that does get them into the Conference League, I put them automatic favourites, especially with players like Isak, Gordon, Bruno, Joelinton, Tonali, all in their ranks. They've got every chance now to build on this and create something. Create, something at Newcastle that can build on for the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. Let me know your thoughts down below. Make sure you do drop a like, and I will see you all in the next time.